Hello again, Darklander. I am Gregarious Garrett, and welcome back to Darklanders 101, where your survival is my curriculum. Today, our studies take us to a faction which many consider to be as much of a threat to the Republic as the Sons of Samhain and the All Souls. I talk, of course, about Neo-Americans. Now, for those who may not be savvy on American history, allow me to explain. In the aftermath of the Second World War, America found itself at a fateful crossroads, which came to a head when the infamous Nathaniel Carson defeated Democratic candidate John F. Kennedy in the 1960 election and made sweeping declarations that alienated the United States from the rest of the world while also threatening American democracy. Eventually, Carson's goal of creating an American empire led to the then state of California seceding from the Union. And with the aid of Canada, Mexico, and the European nations, the Republic was able to assert its independence and would eventually become a sprawling superpower. Meanwhile, the United States would begin a campaign of stripping its citizens of personal freedoms, as it dissolved the Democratic Republic into a far more corrupt plutocracy, governed by Carson's successor, Scott Wood, who also abolished the title of president to crown himself the first American chancellor. Democrat, Republican, and all third parties were all disbanded, with the sole ruling power in the country being Woods' National American People's Party, or NAPP, or NAP for short. To maintain their dominance over the nation, the NAP started a series of anti-republic, anti-everyone-else propaganda that portrayed America's loss in the Californian War for Independence as the work of saboteurs within the military, while also painting the Republic's allies as betrayers. Every conflict the United States would lose, whether it be the secession of Louisiana, now referred to as the Kingfish Union, the Second Californian War, and the Third World War, it was never the fault of the country, and was always the backstabbing, dishonorable tactics of its enemies. This campaign of brainwashing, known as US versus Them, was so effective that even after Black Halloween, there are still several cult-like organizations in the Darklands that still maintain the thought process that kept the United States in the doldrums of the world. Let us discuss these individuals and the sub-factions they inhabit in hopes of understanding the full depth of President Carson and Chancellor Woods' manipulation and deceit. You Americans are often categorized under two names, with a third unofficial contender. One is the Carsonites. Carsonites received their name from a term used to describe supporters of Nathaniel Carson during and after his presidency. As his beliefs became more and more radical, many Republicans used this term to distinguish them from the rest of the right wing. In the Darklands, Carsonites still maintain a zealous belief that Nathaniel Carson wasn't just the greatest president in history, but was also the single greatest politician ever born. They believe that Carson's ineptitude and poor leadership wasn't the cause for America's downward plunge, nor its defeat during the Californian War for Independence. Instead, they've twisted the facts in history to form a narrative where Mexicans and Canadians within their borders sabotaged the war effort, and that's why they ultimately lost. This is contradictory to the fact that by this time, Carson's immigration policy had expelled all Mexicans and Canadian citizens from the country, but when has reason stopped a good fanatic? This narrative even states that Carson did not take his own life by a combination of self-inflicted headshot and cyanide pill. Instead, Carsonites believe he was slain by a Republic assassin, who then staged it to appear as such. Therefore, they feel fully justified in their innate hatred for the Republic. But the Carsonite agenda continues. As I said, Carsonites follow the ideals of Nathaniel Carson, which means a vast majority of them also believe that the reason the United States collapsed was due to the machinations of Chancellor Scott Wood. In their eyes, if Carson had lived, the American Empire would have effectively carried out its Golden Circle plan by invading and annexing the Caribbean as well as all of South America. This apparently would have led to some new age for the United States, but it was all ruined by Scott Woods' abolishment of American democracy and the Republic's backstabbing. On the other side of the spectrum lies the Woodsman. These Neo-Americans follow a creed that is in stark contrast to the beliefs of the Carsonites. The Woodsmen see Scott Wood as a liberator, a conqueror, and the greatest American to ever live. This is despite the fact that Scott Wood never liberated or conquered anything, and his practices effectively destroyed the very dream of the Founding Fathers of America. To the Woodsmen, Nathaniel Carson's weakness and self-determination demanded the great governmental changes. They see the plutocracy that had devoured America's natural resources in a span of a few decades as necessary to keep the United States as powerful as it was during the Second World War. Again, this is contradictory to the fact that America as a democratic republic managed to defeat the Soviets overseas in Russia and Asia, while America as a despotic plutocracy couldn't defeat an enemy it shared a landmass with. Given the radical differences between these two factions, one would be forgiven if they believed that these were bitter rivals, constantly battling to prove their problematic ideals as the one and only truth. Despite their contradictory beliefs in the other's deified leader, Woodsmen and Carsonites have maintained a symbiotic relationship due to their mutual hatred for the Republic. As is common in American history, as long as its people have an enemy to fight, they won't turn their attention inwards for a war. As both scorn the Republic and believe that California's secession is the root of all of America's woes, they stand united in their dream of one day seeing the red, white, and black flag hoisted in the air again, while the bear of the Republic crumbles and dies. However, what neither side wants to address is the inevitable civil war that would surely break out between them if said flag were ever raised. Now, I did mention an unofficial third faction among the Neo-Americans. This is because the true patriots do not actually follow the dogmatic propaganda of the post-World War II America. The small yet resilient movement believes that Nathaniel Carson, Scott Wood, and the Republic all doomed the United States. Carson, because it was under his presidency and policies that severed political relations with former allies. Wood, because of his dictatorship and corruption of American society. And finally the Republic, as its secession destroyed the unity of the United States. Even more egregious is that the true patriots take their veneration of America to even greater fanaticism than the Carsonites and the Woodsmen. Despite the many faults of the aforementioned two factions, at least these people still maintain the idea that Nathaniel Carson and Scott Wood were still simply men of flesh and blood. The true patriots, on the other hand, revere the Founding Fathers as a literal American divine pantheon, with a seat of power at the peak of Mount Elbert. I wish I was joking, but yes, the true patriots see the Founding Fathers as akin to the Greek gods of the ancient world, Mount Olympus and all. From what I learned from my interview with a former true patriot, George Washington is the god patriot who delivers independence and freedom. However, she was very forward that God President Washington did not champion the Californians during their secession. Abraham Lincoln is the god of liberation and the hero god of escaped slaves. James Madison is the god of war, and Benjamin Franklin is the god of invention and fertility. Now, some of you may be wondering why you might not have heard of the true patriots, or if you have, why are they considered Neo-Americans? Well, the reason for them being so obscure is due to both their low numbers and their congregation around the Carolina territory, so many Republic Darklanders may never encounter them in their lifetimes. Not that they are necessarily a threat. Contradictory to many Neo-American movements, they are not actively aggressive towards anyone who doesn't attack them first. This is due to the policies of their leader, whose true name is unfortunately lost to time, is only referred to as Cosmo for reasons even I couldn't deduce. Cosmo stated that the true patriots shouldn't rise up in arms against their enemies, but instead, quote, allow time to prove them right. He saw the true patriots as the rightful successors to the American throne, but they would allow their adversaries to turn on themselves and destroy each other from within before staking their claim. Personally, I find it to be one hell of a gamble, but not a bad strategy, even if this belief stems from my belief that the Darklands doesn't need another conflict. But why do some consider them to be Neo-Americans? Well, it is solely due to their adversarial views of the Republic, as well as their position in the States. Like I said, they are an unofficial faction. Traveling north of the Republic into the woodlands of Oregon and Madison, one may be cautioned to keep their affiliation with the Republic a secret and their head down. This is because these territories are the breeding grounds for two of the most frequently encountered aspects of the Neo-American movement, the Second Militia and the Madison Liberation Front. Two factions that once fought under a single flag, only to now fight against each other under the same flag. The Second Militia and the Madison Liberation Front were united as the American West, a resistance movement that began after California invaded and annexed the states of Oregon and Madison during the Second Californian War. The American West, using guerrilla tactics and high-caliber firepower, was unable to repel the technological advantage of their Republic adversary, but by sheer force of will and stubbornness, managed to maintain a consistent threat to Pacific stability all the way up until Black Halloween. When the world before died, the American West saw its chance for full liberation. They burned and massacred any colony that was affiliated with the Republic, forcing its citizens to flee either south to California or north to the more hospitable Washington Territory. In their eyes, the American West was victorious in liberating their homes from the tyranny of the Republic. But unfortunately, the organization soon imploded. You see, the American West successfully seized control over the Oregon and Madison territories, but then its people became divided. On one side, the Madisonian-born members wanted to re-establish the independent state of Madison, with Medford again becoming their capital. But on the other, the Oregonians wanted to reabsorb Madison into their state. This schism led to a bloody conflict that is still being fought to this day. The American West was divided between the Oregonian Second Militia and the Madison Liberation Front, each believing the other is wrong and has been corrupted by the Republic. Somehow, the Second Militia earns its name from the amendment they zealously defend. When it became clear that the Republic intended to invade Oregon, the common belief was the Californians were coming to disarm them. "Take my rifle when I'm dead" was a popular war cry from the defenders. Sadly for them, many rifles were indeed taken. The Second Militia fully believed that if not for Madison's 5-day collapse under the Republic invasion, Oregon could have better prepared its defenses to fight off the Republic Army. The Madison Liberation Front believes the opposite. They believe that Oregon should have provided more support from the state. This goes against the fact that both states were still under the control of the US government, which historically provided little support for either of them. But instead of blaming the government, it's much easier to simply blame each other. Prejudice, bigotry, fanaticism, violence. These are the principles that Nathaniel Carson and Scott Wood passed down to their followers. A radical belief that the United States in every form is perfect and invincible, that all problems have roots stemming from the Republic and its allies. Neo-Americans may follow a flawed and easily debunked series of creeds, but if one tries to debate with them, if one tries to reason with them, they'll find themselves speaking to a brick wall fortified by generations of propaganda taken as gospel. Now, I must say that not all who live in the States are Neo-Americans. During my travels with Roy, we encountered many who had put the past in the past, and sought to better themselves and others to the best of their abilities. These individuals look at history through pragmatic and reasonable lenses. It is just unfortunate that there are so many others who purposefully and gleefully blind themselves to the truth, believing only in what they are told, and not questioning a word they hear. These individuals will not die out. Theirs is a contagion that will forever plague the world and pollute the minds of future generations. If you find yourself confronted by them, keep calm. If asked about your state of origin, simply reply, "I'm an American," and they'll be satisfied. You'll see. You may say this all sounds far too easy, but that's where the great Neo-American fault lies. What they love more than hating the Republic is being assured that they're right. Just whatever you do, do not give in to the gospel they preach, as theirs are the words that enslaved a nation and condemned a great nation. I am Gregarious Garrett, and I thank you for your attendance. I'll see you in the next installment of Darklanders 101.